If you want to support the channel, then please check out my Patreon page to gain access to exclusive videos, take part in Q&As and watch my retrospectives before they go live on YouTube.
My life, my job is to vanquish evil. I can sense evil. This thing, man, whatever it is, evil may have created it, may have left its mark on it, but evil does not rule it, so I cannot kill it. Bless me, Father, Frank.
Sin, yes and no. You're very good at that.
Your results are unquestionable, but your methods attract far too much attention.
And Helsing! You murderer!
Do you think I like being the most wanted man in Europe? Why don't you and the Order do something about it?
Because we do not exist.
Empires come and go, but we have kept mankind safe since time immemorial. We are the last defense against evil.
Silver Stake.
An evil that the rest of mankind has no idea even exists. And now, we need you to go to the east. To the far side of Romania. An accursed land, terrorized by all sorts of nightmarish creatures. Lorded over by a certain Count Dracula. Our story begins 450 years ago, when a Transylvanian knight named Valerius the Elder promised God that his family would never rest nor enter heaven until they vanquished Dracula from their land. They have not succeeded, and they are running out of family. His descendant, Boris Valerius, king of the Gypsies, he disappeared almost 12 months ago. His only son, Prince Velkan, and his daughter, Princess Anna. If the two of them are killed before Dracula is vanquished, 9 generations of their family will never enter the gates of St. Peter.
Gentlemen, you will now be disarmed.
You can try.
Kill them.
I'm here to help you.
I don't need any help.
Really?
I'm at war with the world and every living soul in it.
Soon, the final battle will begin.
Van Helsing teared its way onto the big screen in early May of 2004. Directed by Stephen Sommers, who had great success at the box office with The Mummy and The Mummy Returns. He was box office gold for Universal Pictures, and they again gave him a huge budget of $160 million to produce this horror mashup with Van Helsing battling the classic monsters of literature. But the film was panned by critics on release. Many felt it to be the worst blockbuster of the summer, complaining it was weighed down by a complete lack of wit, artfulness and internal logic. They added further by saying director Sommers uses action as the only means of involving an audience, so story is sacrificed. Character development is non-existent and there are no attempts to incite emotion. Roger Ebert would be one of the very few who would give the film a strong review, with 3 stars out of 4, surprising his fellow co-host Richard Roper, who was not impressed. Roger said at the outset, "We may fear Sommers is simply going for FX overkill, but by the end he has somehow succeeded in assembling all his monsters and plot threads into a high voltage climax. Van Helsing is silly, spectacular and fun." Despite the bashing by critics, it would go on to earn $300 million worldwide, which were strong numbers, but due to its production cost and money spent on marketing, there were action figures produced and even a Van Helsing attraction at Universal Studios. Universal were predicting a bigger return, and the intended sequel would be scrapped, but an animated short was produced the same year which detailed the events before the film, with Van Helsing hunting down Mr. Hyde, called The London Assignment. At only 30 minutes long, many felt it should have just been included as an extra on the DVD. When the movie eventually hit home video, it earned a whopping $65 million in its first week, but this still didn't encourage the studio to pursue with any follow-up. Since its release, it has retained a strong following with those who grew up with it and appreciate it as a guilty pleasure, but others feel it to be the worst of Stephen Sommers' films. After finishing The Mummy Returns, Stephen Sommers said that people had jokingly asked him if he was going to do anything with Dracula, but he felt the character had already been done to death on film, but he thought it would be cool to take all the classic Universal monsters and bring them all together somehow. The idea had been explored somewhat in Fred Dekker's Monster Squad, but Stephen saw something bigger in scope. This idea stayed with him and drove him to re-examine the classic monsters which had helped turn Universal Studios into a Hollywood leader more than 7 decades ago. The director was determined to link the existence of the monsters, giving them involved on-screen relationships far beyond more coincidence or happenstance. He wondered how he could take these legends and have it so their characters and stories all intersect. The connecting premise needed to be both true to the characters' popular mythologies and organic at the same time. Sommers said he couldn't just have a hero taking on the 3 monsters for no reason. Then it struck him, what if Dracula had a life and death reason for needing Dr. Frankenstein's monster? Sommers said for a story like this there has to be a motivation behind the evil. His simple need to kill people for their blood has been so established and explored in films and books. So as soon as he hit on what might be driving Dracula, what his motivation was, everything started to come together. Sommers realised that Frankenstein's monster, Dracula and the Wolfman could all exist in the same world. The setting for all of their legends is Eastern Europe, around the same time. The ultimate linking piece to Sommers' narrative puzzle lay in a character created by classic author Bram Stoker within the pages of Dracula. In Stoker's novel, Van Helsing is 60 years old and his first name is Abraham, naming the character after himself, with Bram being a shortening of Abraham. Helsing had been a character in countless movies, but no one's ever done a movie centred around him. Sommers needed to find a way to make him his own. He changed his first name to Gabriel, and Sommers wanted to make him younger and cooler in a sense. Stephen developed Gabriel's backstory. He doesn't know who he is and where he is in life. He doesn't remember anything about his past. Stephen had also wanted to include the Gill Man from Creature of the Black Lagoon, having a cameo appearance when Van Helsing and Anna discover Frankenstein's monster. However, this idea was dropped before filming began. For the cast, we have Hugh Jackman as Van Helsing. Even before the script was written, Sommers was creating the character and story with only Hugh in mind. He was offered an early draft of the script when he was about to start production on X-Men 2. As soon as Hugh read it, he could visualise it strongly and thought he could really bring something to the role. Hugh Jackman said he always wanted to do a big action movie, like Errol Flynn, and this project had that huge epic action-adventure quality to it. Fellow Aussie actor Richard Roxburgh plays Count Dracula, the ruler of Transylvania. Richard was best known for his performance in Moulin Rouge. He seemed to Sommers as the perfect actor to bring a refreshing spin on a familiar villain. Sommers explained the movie takes place in the 1800s, and Richard plays Dracula like a kind of privileged rock star in a really good way. There's something sexy, twisted and cool about the way Richard inhabits the role. Richard had just played another villain in The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which, like Van Helsing, was critically panned and failed to light up the box office. Kate Beckinsale stars as Anna, a gypsy princess. She is one of the last living members of an ancient family committed to the pursuit and destruction of Dracula in order to lift a curse that's hung over her family for generations. Stephen wanted Kate for the role of Anna, but feared it was too similar in tone to the vampire/werewolf film Underworld, which she was shooting at the time, and they decided not to ask her. Eventually her agent got Sommers to send the script, and Beckinsale immediately signed on, as she loved the action and horror genre. Will Kemp plays as Velkan, Anna's brother, who is cursed after being attacked by the Wolfman. According to Sommers, after watching the original film, he thought the character was a really tormented soul. He wants to be a good person, but he just can't help his nature. You feel a lot of sympathy for him. Instead of transforming in the more traditional way, this version has the beast emerge from within, literally ripping through Velkan's flesh. David Wenham plays Carl, a friar of the Holy Order. David was best known at the time for his appearance in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and later 300. Carl's an inventor and is forced into a situation where he has to go along on a dangerous journey, but he realises he's helping Van Helsing in his mission to vanquish evil from the world. Sheila Hensley stars as Frankenstein's monster, and would also double for Mr. Hyde for the motion capture sequences. Sommers and his team decided to acknowledge the iconic look of the creature while trying to add new elements as well. Sommers said, "We wanted to keep the flat head and the bolts and the massive shoes, but wanted to enhance it all, taking it further. and like Mary Shelley's original monster, this Frankenstein can communicate intelligently. Kevin J. O'Connor plays Igor, a servant of Frankenstein, now working for Dracula.
No, it's pronounced Igor.
But they told me it was Igor.
Well, they were wrong then, weren't they?
The role of Igor was written specifically for Kevin, as he was Summers' close friend, having worked with him on Deep Rising and The Mummy. We have Dracula's three brides, with Sylvia Coloca as Verona. Director Stephen Summers had always imagined Verona to be the wife, and the other two as being more like Dracula's mistresses. Sylvia and Richard ended up starting a relationship and married the following year. Josie Moran plays Marischka, who was killed early on by Van Helsing, and we have Eleanor Anya as Elira, who appears to be the most deadly out of the group. For some of the smaller roles, we have Alan Armstrong as Cardinal Genetti, Van Helsing's superior in the Holy Order. Alan had worked with Stephen Summers, appearing as a villain in The Mummy Returns. Tom Fisher plays Top Hat, a Transylvanian gravedigger. Tom as well also appeared in The Mummy Returns. Popular TV star Samuel West plays Dr. Victor Frankenstein, and we have the always reliable Robbie Coltrane, who is the voice of Mr. Hyde. Robbie had worked with the director a number of years before on The Adventures of Huck Finn. Cameras started rolling in Prague in January 2003. They constructed a set for the Holy Order's hideout, where they deployed mirrors to extend the set. A lot of the exterior work was shot in the Czech Republic. Some second unit teams even went to Canada to film Van Helsing's trip over the mountains to Transylvania. The film was storyboarded and pre-visualised with the intent of shooting the film in the anamorphic 2:3:5:1 format, like Stephen Summers' previous films. The aspect ratio was changed to 1:8:5:1 in order to better accommodate Dracula's vertically orientated castle without having to extend the sets. Richard Roxburgh would attempt to do his own wirework stunts. Kate Beckinsale said she hated the corset she had to wear for most of the shooting. When the film finally wrapped, she wanted to burn it all. Once filming had finished in Europe, principal photography relocated to the sound stages of Playa Vista in LA to film Frankenstein's laboratory. For this scene, production designer Alan Cameron paid tribute to the classic film, filling the lab with the familiar shapes of Frankenstein's equipment, while making the instruments more complex than their 1930s predecessors. The cinematographer was excited to actually film the opening sequence in black and white. It was very rare at the time, and still is to this day, to shoot a big production in that format. They were going to include the original 1932 Universal logo to start the film, but for some reason it didn't work in their eyes, so they made use of the new modern one. The production wrapped after 109 days of shooting in early July. The production team now had roughly 10 months to finish the extensive visual effects, edit and score the picture. Before Van Helsing even premiered, Summers began developing a spin-off TV series for NBC called Transylvania. Though featuring none of the characters from the film, the series, which was to have made use of the film's Prague set, was about a young cowboy from Texas who becomes a sheriff in Transylvania and encounters many strange creatures. Summers wrote a script for the pilot and the first several episodes, but NBC decided not to go through with it. For the film story, we open in Transylvania in 1887 with Dr. Victor Frankenstein. With help from his assistant Igor and Count Dracula, he successfully creates a monster. Dracula kills Frankenstein to use the creature for his own purposes. As an angry mob storms the castle, the monster flees to a windmill with his dead creator. The local villagers burn down the windmill, believing they have destroyed the monster. 1 year later, Van Helsing is hunting down Mr. Hyde in Paris, who he has been tracking from London. Once discovering him, they battle it out and Van Helsing kills him in the process. Helsing is in trouble with the authorities, with them not realising he is killing these monsters to protect them. He travels to the Vatican and he is tasked by Cardinal Genetti to go to Transylvania and destroy Dracula. He must also protect the last members of an ancient Romanian family. He receives a torn parchment reading, "In the name of God, open this door," in Latin. Van Helsing travels to Transylvania accompanied by Karl, who has been dragged out of his comfort zone to assist Van Helsing. Anna and Vulcan attempt to kill a werewolf controlled by Dracula, but they fail to capture it and Vulcan is injured and cursed. Van Helsing and Karl arrive in a village, where they and Anna are attacked by Dracula's three brides. Van Helsing slays Marischka, bringing the battle to an end. Anna agrees to work with Van Helsing to save her brother and fulfill her family's mission to defeat Dracula. The two follow Vulcan, who has transformed into a werewolf, to Castle Frankenstein, now used by Dracula in an attempt to duplicate Dr. Frankenstein's experiments to give life to his undead children, using Vulcan as a conduit. While Anna tries to rescue her brother, Van Helsing confronts Dracula, who addresses him as Gabriel, and offers to return his memories to him as he has been trying to piece together his past. At Anna's castle, Carl witnesses a painting come to life, depicting two knights, respectively transforming into a vampire and a werewolf, revealing the clue to defeat Count Dracula. The visual effects for Van Helsing would mostly be handled by ILM, with over 1,200 shots to be completed, with some of the work farmed out to Weta Digital, Captive Audience and Illusion Arts. The film would make use of extensive CGI, plus the massive software program developed for the Lord of the Rings trilogy for use of large-scale animated characters. They made use of motion capture, digital matte paintings and even miniatures. The filmmakers would make use of pre-visualization to create mock-up versions of their elaborate action sequences. Every scene pretty much had computer effects utilised. One of the biggest challenges were the flying vampire brides. They filmed the actors with motion capture suits, their faces in makeup. They would wire them up and simulate the effect of flying in front of a blue screen, and digitally comp in their bodies to include their wings. With Frankenstein's monster, there are departures from his classic look, but you can see they wanted to keep the feeling of the original. Shula Hensley's eventual makeup transformation into the Doctor's creation took about 4 hours to complete, with Hensley enrobed in a zipped up silicone rubber bodysuit with leg extensions, which raised the already tall actor to a standing height of about 7'2". Stephen Sommers deliberately chose to avoid the style of transformations from other werewolf films, where the character would usually grow hair as part of the change. Instead, the decision was made to have the character rip his skin off, to reveal the werewolf from underneath, with CGI being used to morph the man into a beast. The same effect would be used for Van Helsing's transformation as well. Oddly, Sommers said to the effects team that he had to be a sexy werewolf. I suppose he has a more stylish hairdo for a Wolfman? For the main villain Dracula, Stephen Sommers never found the idea of the Count turning into a bat scary, so he thought, what about a bat with a 15-foot wingspan? With an influence of winged ghouls, harpies and gargoyles. Sommers had issues on The Mummy Returns, expressing his disappointment with ILM and their efforts on The Scorpion King. So for the big finale, they had to avoid the pitfalls of his previous film. Thankfully, the end results were nowhere near as bad. The FX team admitted to having a lot of fun designing the shots for the two monsters to battle it out. In some cases, one shot would take 1 to 2 months to complete. The visual effects throughout Van Helsing are very inconsistent. Again, it's another example of Stephen Sommers being too ambitious and relying on CGI to achieve everything in his imagination. The weakest effect lies with the vampire brides. They are used pretty much in every action sequence. There are some shots, I must admit, that do work, and I appreciate their methods on how they went about to achieve them. But the majority of the time they have that bobblehead look, as their heads don't seem attached to their bodies. Seeing one of them land and transform and then witnessing her death looks appalling, like a cut and paste effect. It seems very two-dimensional. The end battle is like watching a video game. The use of the baby vampires look unfinished as they attack the locals in large numbers. Everything is so over the top, but to a younger audience I'm sure it's great eye candy, but this didn't do much for me. The effects of seeing someone transform or say morph into something else has been done dozens of times, especially throughout the 90s, and even with Sommers' previous Mummy films. So in my eyes it appears like a lazy attempt to avoid any practical effects in favour of doing it all in the computer. I love the miniature effects, the matte paintings by Sid Dutton and his team at Illusion Arts, and the exterior work with the aggressive lighting and splendid photography. It creates something visually striking and impressive for the third act. But the CGI has not aged particularly well, and I just wish Sommers went with the idea of less is more, instead of throwing everything at you to see what sticks. The legendary composer Alan Silvestri would write the score to Van Helsing. Having worked with Sommers on The Mummy Returns, they would strike up a good working relationship as they worked together again on Sommers' next production, G.I. Joe The Rise of Cobra. Silvestri, of course best known for his work on the Back to the Future trilogy, Predator 1 and 2, Forrest Gump, and more recently for his efforts on the Marvel Avengers series. Sommers' direction for Alan was that Van Helsing was not a horror film, but a romantic action-adventure monster movie. Alan was a big fan of the monster films of the past from Universal Pictures, and he subscribed to the old monster magazines in his youth, went straight to work writing the music. The score would be big and bombastic, creating a heroic theme for Van Helsing that would be deployed when he jumps into action. For Dracula, he would use a lot of low-end percussion and strong brass, with an additional 60-piece choir to add further scope to the music, and even electronic effects. Alan would end up writing over 115 minutes worth of music. The score is the highlight of the movie. It's pretty much all action throughout, with little time dedicated for more slower emotional pieces of music. The sound mixers make full use of Alan's material, and it doesn't get drowned out. It's used to the fullest, which is often rare these days, with many scores getting lost in the sound mix, but Alan's score stands there loud and proud. The score is full of great musical moments. The opening music introducing Frankenstein's monster is a great homage to the music of the past. The theme as Van Helsing travels to Transylvania, it's got the gothic themes, heavy action cues, everything just fires on all cylinders. The soundtrack came to CD when the film arrived in theatres, containing 12 tracks of music and is about 40 minutes in length. Unfortunately, it's never been expanded officially. I did at first think it was given a deluxe edition after finding an image online, but unfortunately it was a bootleg. You can find these expanded bootleg editions floating around online. A proper remaster with the full score is definitely needed, as a lot of great music is missing, especially the end credits, which has a great rendition of the main theme. You can still find the old CD album second-hand online for a reasonable price, and it's available digitally on iTunes. If you love Alan Silvestri's work, then this is one you must add to your collection. There was a video game based on the movie for the PS2, Xbox and Game Boy Advance. The games were developed by Sapphire. The video game follows the plot of the film but expands sections as most games do, with rendered cutscenes instead of deploying clips from the film. It features the voice talent of many of the actors, excluding Kate Beckinsale. It played very similar to Capcom's Devil May Cry. You control Van Helsing as he battles the monsters with his arsenal of weapons, and you have the option to take them out with melee attacks. The game has a fixed camera angle, which can be a bit frustrating, and some enemies are off screen when they attack you. Luckily, the auto aim in the game is really effective. You can upgrade your weapons and ammo along the way, and the graphics are pretty solid throughout, and they hold up well by today's standards. The reviews at the time were generally positive, with many feeling it was better than the film. It's a game that has been somewhat forgotten about. Often the case when the movie fails to make much of an impression, the spin-off merchandise such as video games often fall by the wayside. So it's certainly worth checking out, as it's a strong licensed title. Sadly, the same can't be said for the GBA game, which is a massive stinker, which is surprising as it's from the same developer. They clearly spent little time on it, as the focus was clearly on the console versions. Playing with a 2D isometric view, you control Van Helsing as you button mash your way through killing the monsters. The game felt rushed, it had sloppy collision detection, poor art design, loads of slowdown, and was fairly short. Best avoided and stick to the console game to get your Van Helsing fix. Or just play the Castlevania games, because they are basically the same, as they feature the same monsters and are leagues better. Van Helsing was on its last run when I became a projectionist back in 2004. I'd seen bits of it while working, and it looked like a very interesting movie, but word of mouth had largely been negative. The reviews in the press were less than enthusiastic, and my friends who had watched it didn't seem very impressed. From what I gathered, it seemed to follow the same problems of The Mummy Returns, a clumsy script with an over-reliance on computer effects that didn't look finished, so I gave it a miss. Being a fan of composer Alan Silvestri, I listened to the score and thought the music was incredible, so I finally sat down to watch it, and despite the movie having superb photography, great production design, the script was clearly a mess. It felt like they shot the first draft of the script. It really needed a lot of work to flesh out and develop these characters. I really struggled to care about them. The whole film felt like a rollercoaster ride with dialogue just there to glue these action sequences together. We know little about Van Helsing apart from the basics, so he's trying to piece together his past, very much like Hugh Jackman's other famous role of Wolverine. We don't see Gabriel haunted by his past, there are no flashbacks, so you have a whole backstory just feeling wafer thin for him to have some conflict with Dracula by the end. The film starts out so well in black and white to really enforce the universal classic horror movies from the golden age of cinema. It just looks stunning with a great use of shadows, then it cuts to colour with Van Helsing hunting down Mr. Hyde. This is all fine entertainment. The CGI character of Hyde blends well with the live action material. the film is starting out strong, but once we get to the Vatican, it goes full on James Bond, which I found tonally weird and out of place. We then have the Cardinal telling Van Helsing stuff about their history. Van Helsing should know all of this, right? It's just a ploy to inform the audience. It's lazy exposition. To inform the audience, you have to use a character who doesn't know this information. But having him tell Van Helsing their past and what they do, he already knows this. It's a prime example of bad writing. Then the rest of the story is kind of structured like a lazy James Bond ripoff. Goes from point A to point B, meeting characters along the way in efforts to stop Dracula and his goal to take over the Earth. Many have said Richard Roxburgh's interpretation of Dracula is one of the worst. I haven't seen all of the films and TV shows that feature Dracula to make such a bold statement, but it's certainly not good. Richard is a great actor, but has been given the wrong direction. He is over the top, comical, and not really threatening. There are moments, granted, where Richard is totally in character and you buy him as Dracula, but 90% of the time he is just dialed up to 11. If you have a movie that has comedy, where things are played out to appeal to family audiences, especially with the friar Carl, who is used to provide some light-hearted banter and to explain the plot to the audience. The villain, however, should not be made fun of and should be played totally straight. That's the character of the story you shouldn't really mess around with, because it just dilutes the conflict between good and evil. The audience shouldn't be laughing at the bad guy, you should be scared of him or find him threatening. If you watch, say, Masters of the Universe, a silly but fun film, Skeletor is played consistently straight and serious by Frank Langella, who also played Dracula in 1979 and provided a memorable performance. Richard is memorable for all the wrong reasons, sadly. The plot involving Dracula bringing his children to life is an interesting way to go, I suppose. I don't think anyone has gone this direction before, but it's not very well explained. Have these brides given birth to these pods? Is that correct? Or have their children died and are placed into these gooey containers for them to be resurrected? It's all a bit weird, to be honest, and just reminded me of the end scene in Species 2. I don't know what's going on with everyone's accents in the film. Alan Armstrong's Italian accent is all over the place. Kate Beckinsale sounds forced and comical. Hugh Jackman just isn't bothering, a bit like Kevin Costner in Robin Hood Prince of Thieves. Van Helsing is supposed to be Dutch, but he just uses a regular Aussie/American accent throughout. It all adds to the silliness of the movie. Even though I said I don't care about the characters, especially with the likes of Van Helsing and Anna, the one character that does work is Frankenstein's monster. The pain and torture he has gone through, seeing him want to live and help defeat Dracula, works extremely well. Schuler really nails the character for me and is definitely the heart of the film. The movie tries to deploy a lot of action, but I can't really recall any sequences that really impress me. When you are dealing with CG characters and monsters, the filmmakers don't tend to have many close-up fighting moments, but instead just have the CG character punch someone and they go flying across the screen. So when watching the film, you see the actors just bouncing around the frame on wires, like they are in some world made up of trampolines. The end battle between Van Helsing and Dracula is like watching a kid bashing two action figures together. That's what it felt like. You have moments in the action that repeat themselves, people swinging on cables, it happens like 3 times throughout, Anna's constantly doing backflips. Van Helsing has a great arsenal of weapons, which he hardly uses. When he pulls out his automatic crossbow, he can't shoot for shit. It's all just action fluff. What stands out as the worst scene in the film, and is definitely the most laughable in its execution, is of course the ending with Van Helsing seeing Anna in the clouds, reunited with her family. Of course it draws strong comparison to The Lion King, but I just don't understand why anyone thought this was a good idea. Surely some of the executives at Universal Pictures must have laughed their arses off seeing this and questioned why this was done this way. Producer and editor Bob Doucet said there was a concern on their behalf if it would work, but apparently test audiences approved of it. These people need a good slapping. Apparently there is a strong fan base for this movie. I can understand why. The classic monsters of literature and horror films of the past always retain a following, and new fans pop up when the classics like Dracula and the Wolfman are utilised again. And for those who watched Van Helsing as kids when it came out, will have a strong nostalgic connection to it and probably enjoy it, knowing its faults, and just accept it as a guilty pleasure. We all have a selection of movies we enjoy that are objectively rubbish, but we love them nonetheless. Some people love Van Helsing because it's pure schlock. I don't think the director Stephen Sommers went out with the idea that it was going to be schlocky entertainment. Deep Rising from 1998 is pure schlock, however, and it knows it is. Its tongue is firmly in its cheek. But this attempts to take itself somewhat seriously and is going out of its way to treat the source material with respect, but because of the dialogue and it being tonally uneven, it falters very quickly into its story. I personally have no nostalgia for this movie, and I think it's a wasted opportunity and Summers really dropped the ball. I think he needed another writer to collaborate with and polish it off. It becomes this CGI special effects ride, and the script was sacrificed for spectacle. Of course there is positive elements to it which I've highlighted, with its production design, photography, soundtrack and its whole concept. I think Universal should revisit this for a remake, use Van Helsing as the centre of this dark universe, which they failed to ignite a few years ago. Keep the budgets low to say $50 million, keep them R-rated movies, set it in the 19th century, and for each movie he fights one of the classic monsters, perhaps teams up with one of them. Dracula can be the main villain throughout a series of sequels, who then Van Helsing battles in the final film, and have the final movie be set in World War II as the backdrop. Have Dracula working with the Nazis or something of that nature. Stephen Summers has produced some fun films and some stinkers. I love Deep Rising for its B-movie direction, and The Mummy is an enjoyable Indiana Jones romp that works extremely well and has bucket loads of charm. But come The Mummy Returns, his scripts just became sloppy, clearly obsessed with digital effects and just trying to wow audiences by throwing the latest technology at them. It's the inherent problem with summer blockbusters. This has happened time and time again. Not so often now, this was a problem of late 90s cinema and it crossed over into the 2000s. They had over-bloated budgets with long-winded effects-driven sequences that are linked together with forgettable dialogue and use dumps of exposition to keep the audience engaged on the basic level. This film has so much potential but is just so poorly executed. It's a big shame and a waste of the talented individuals who put this movie together behind the scenes and performed on camera. Oh well, if you love it, that's great, but there is so much more filmmakers can do with these characters, especially coming together to battle it out. Hopefully in future, Universal Pictures will bring them together one more time to do it justice.
Is this your silver steak? How long has it been? 300-400 years? You don't remember, do you?
Exactly what is it I should be remembering?
You are the great Van Helsing. Like me, hunted by all others.
The Knights of the Holy Order know all about you. It's no surprise you would know about me.
Yes, but it's much more than this. We have such history, you and I, Gabriel.
It all started when Dracula was murdered.
Do you know who murdered him?
No. There's just some vague reference to the left hand of God. And in 1462, when Dracula died, he made a covenant with the devil.
And was given a new life.
And your ancestor, having sired this evil creature, went to Rome to seek forgiveness. That's when the bargain was made. He was to kill Dracula in return for eternal salvation of his entire family, right down the line, all the way to you.
But he couldn't do it. As evil as Dracula was, my ancestor couldn't kill his own son.
So he banished him to an icy fortress, sending him to a door from which there was no return.
And then the devil gave him wings.
Yes.
Castle Dracula.
Do we have a plan? It doesn't have to be Wellington's at Waterloo, but some sort of plan would be nice.
We're going to go in there and stop Dracula.
And kill anything that gets in our way.
There is a cure.
Dracula! He has a cure to remove the curse of the werewolf!
Come on, you heard them. Let's find him.
Wait, why does Dracula have a cure?
I don't care.
Because the only thing that can kill him is a werewolf. The painting, that's what it meant.
But Dracula has been using werewolves to do his bidding for centuries.
Yes, but if one ever had the will to turn on him, he'd need a cure to remove the curse and make him human before it bit him.
Did I mention that it was you who murdered me? It must be such a burden, such a curse, to be the left hand of God.
You're supposed to die!
I want to live!